I am State Senator Dean Murray, and I wanted to thank everyone for coming out today. And let me start by explaining what the purpose of today is, or what my hope is for today, because the child care issue, and Jennifer, when we got together in December and held the press conference, you said a word that I think accurately described it when you said crisis. And I think we are in a crisis right now. And it's one of those issues that it doesn't grab a lot of headlines. But you know the old saying that, when you know, you know. Well, when you're involved in this and it's impacting you, you know how important this is and how deep this problem goes. Because it's not just on the level of one issue. I think we have kind of a three-pronged problem right now. One is, as we can see by the chart, the affordability issue. And you see Long Island is one of the most expensive in the state. Only New York City is barely higher. It quite frankly can be unaffordable to the point where some parents have to sit down, put pen to paper, and when they do the math, it doesn't add up. Why would you go to work? To just pay to have someone else watch your child and you miss them growing up. It doesn't make sense to them. So I've talked to parents who said, I've bypassed going back to work, and we're struggling then. So it is a crisis for parents, but it's also a crisis. And I want to first, I should back up. Let me introduce our staff that's here today. Nicole Lamacchia, who's done a fantastic job in putting everything together for us today. Mike Napolitano, who's been my shadow all day today, but Mike's doing a great job with us. And with us on Zoom are Brittany Volpe and Charlie Silverstein, who will answer any technical questions that we might have. And I apologize, I am drawing a blank. Our cameraman.
Dylan.
Dylan, right. Dylan, thank you so much. And Dylan, by the way, traveled all the way down from Albany and will be packing up and traveling all the way back up to Albany. So he deserves the gold star for today. So Dylan, thank you so much today. But Brittany and Charlie put together some statistics for me, and I say this because moving on to the second prong of our three-prong problem is availability of childcare. There was a study done, Office of Children and Family Services did their child care facts and figures reports. They did a report in 2014, and then they did another report 7 years later in 2021. In 2014, their report showed there were 20,810 licensed and registered child care providers in the state. 7 years later, 2021, that number dropped to 17,850, almost a 3,000 decrease, a decrease of 3,000 providers. Again, if that doesn't scream crisis, I don't know what does. Was it COVID? I'm sure that played a role, but that couldn't be the only problem, which leads us to the third prong, and that is staffing. That is making sure that we have child care providers, child care workers, and are they earning enough? Are they able to make a living, or are they moving on and using this as a stepping stone? Have we positioned this as glorified babysitters, which is not what they do? Do we need to take them more seriously and say, look, this is a profession, this is a real job, this is something, maybe we make them certified, maybe we... Again, how do we do that and make it so this is not a job, not a stepping stone, but this is a career? It's something they want to do, but also not in any way hinder or hamper the services they're providing. Because again, at the end of the day, the most important thing are our kids. So today, and the point of today was for us to get all angles covered, if you will, and even from the impact business community and the businesses that are having trouble hiring because parents aren't getting back into the workforce. So we're feeling it on that level as well. So we wanted to make sure that we reached out to everyone and get the input so that we can start the discussion. I want today to be the beginning. And the reason we're videotaping this isn't really for press or anything like this. I want to share this with my Senate colleagues and with the governor. The governor, over the past couple of years, to her credit, has taken steps to try to address this. And I give her a lot of credit for that. But we need to go further. And we need this discussion to go further. So today, I'm hoping we can bounce around ideas throw them off each other, the good, the bad, the ugly. Nothing is out of bounds. I want you to just, if you have an idea, share it. If you have a thought, if I throw out an idea and you say it's ridiculous, then tell me it's ridiculous and tell me why. Because I'm hoping this starts a bigger conversation. And hopefully it leads to maybe more formal hearings in Albany, larger. Maybe it sparks the governor to take more action, and maybe we can start moving on some programs or ideas. So today is the start, not the end. So with that speech done, I'd like to go around the room and have everyone introduce yourselves. I also want to mention this. We did get a few inquiries from the press. If it's okay with you, we have the sign-in sheet and all. If you do not want us to share your contact information, just let us know. But we were going to also let the press have your contact info in case they wanted to talk to you if they do a story on this, if that's okay with everyone. And you can, again, let us know at the end if you're okay with it or not. But with that said, we'll start on this side. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then we'll bring it around.
Hi, I'm Samantha Halpin.
Oh, do you need the microphone? Okay. You can pop it off.
Oh, does it?
I think you can pop it out if you want. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Samantha Halpin. I'm currently the legislative chair for SHRM Long Island. I'm also working at a nonprofit organization, the Sisters of St. Joseph, right now as an HR director.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Picarillo. I am a board trustee for the Sachem School Board.
Hello, I'm Edna White. I am the president of the Greater Gordon Heights Chamber of Commerce, representing the Brookhaven Chamber Council of Chambers.
Hi, my name is Jessica Ward. I'm the president of the Rocky Point Board of Education.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Rojas. I'm the executive director at the Childcare Council of Suffolk. I'm also the board chair of our statewide network, the Early Care and Learning Council.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Kevin Himes, immediate past president of the Ronkonkoma Chamber of Commerce. I'm on the board of the Brookhaven Coalition of Chambers, and I'm also a leading advocate with AARP.
Hi, my name is Kristen Vitarelli. I'm actually a special educator myself, but I am here as a parent of a child that attends Paper Plains.
Hi, my name is Maria Ahrens. I'm an owner and director of a child care center in Mount Sinai.
Hi, my name is Nicole Cravero. I am the CEO of Crave HRO, an HR consulting firm, and I am also here as the HR committee co-chair for the Hauppauge Industrial Association. And fun fact, I was also previously a certified preschool teacher, so.
I wonder why you left.
So you know what? Let's kind of start in that realm. Actually, let me first say, if Jennifer, would you like to say a few words first? And then I'd like to start right over here with parent and provider to start on that angle first. But if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you very quickly. And I want to thank you again for raising attention and bringing light to this issue. I think it's an issue that affects all families, regardless of our political affiliations. And it's just so wonderful to see that this issue hasn't died after that press conference, that you've continued to push it, talk about it. And I really am very happy to be here and to see all of you. There has been some progress, as you mentioned. There is a lot more that needs to be done. And I just wanted to mention that there is a task force, the governor's task force. I have been a member of it since 2018. We're in the part 2 of it now. And I think that what comes out of here will hopefully be very helpful in pushing that forward, because as most task forces on the state go, often you get a report and it sits on a shelf. And our biggest goal is to make sure it doesn't sit on the shelf. And so I think this is another avenue to kind of push that forward. And I'm very grateful to be here for that. But I will turn it over to Maria and to talk about the very specific challenges that the system is facing.
Sure. Let's start there. Okay. So we've been struggling, obviously, since before COVID in the child care industry. mainly because of what you were saying. For example, the first, and it's no offense to you, but being called childcare workers, right, to begin with, my staff are teachers. They are teaching the children. They're not babysitting them. And that's part of the whole issue, is that people are so unaware of the work that goes into the day-to-day in an early childhood setting. Our diaper changing, it's included. Yes, we're changing diapers, we're feeding children, we're keeping up with their individualized schedule, but we're also responsible for growth and development. We see more of their growth and development than a pediatrician does. We are responsible for making sure that they're meeting milestones. If they're not meeting milestones, we're responsible for referring to special ed, settings. And speaking to that, because we're not funded, we also have zero support. So if a child isn't able to get approved for any type of service, you're stuck basically either saying to a teacher, deal with this behavior, deal with this developmental delay, or telling a parent, we can't provide services for you. So it's a real predicament. In a school setting, when they get into kindergarten, you can't just throw a kid out because they're not able to comply with the day-to-day structure of the classroom. So we're constantly put in these predicaments, and there's a lot of pressure, and you never want to just expel a child, right? So that's one issue, is that because there's no funding, we're not supported properly. Another issue that comes up is universal pre-K. A lot of people are really excited about universal pre-K. It idealistically is great. It's impacting our program so negatively that people have shut down for that very reason. So there's a correlation between programs shutting down. It's not just COVID and staffing. It's how do we pay for our program if we're losing 7 to 10 kids a year to universal pre-K. That means I have to raise my prices for dear Kristen because she has an infant toddler. Well, not anymore, but you have to raise the rates on infant and toddler parents to still pay your rent, to pay your staff, because you're losing the population in your rooms that actually makes the most profit to afford raises because of the ratios. So in an infant room, your ratio is 1-4. It's basically a wash. You're not making any money on that. You can't give teachers raises every year based on the money coming in for tuition. And I think a lot of people are unaware that the parents' tuition pays for everything. It's paying for your building cost. It's paying for your payroll, which, by the way, payroll is 60 to 75% of your revenue. Your building cost is anywhere between 18 and 20%. And then you still have to provide cleaning supplies, a nightly cleaner, your food, your educational supplies, everything is covered by a parent's tuition. So that number, though expensive, isn't even covering the cost. Mm-hmm. It's not. So when you have a preschool program and you can have, 14 to 18 kids in a room with 2 or 3 teachers, that's where you're making that profit margin to afford all those other things, to make your program stellar, because we're not getting any funding. So the funding that's come in since COVID is really stabilization funding to keep us open. So you can say, here, I'm giving a bonus. You've worked really hard. The burnout is incredible, mostly because of the ratios and our long hours. Because parents are paying for it and they're working, your expectation is that you're open longer hours, right? So I was a school teacher in a school district. It was a much easier job. I'm not saying that they're working any less, but there's a lot more support. The hours are less, their vacations are more. We're ratio based, so if a teacher's out, you have to cover that, and there's no subsystem for it. So if I want to call another childcare center and say, hey, do you have any extra hands today? That's not legal. You can't even do that because they're not fingerprinted in your program. So a lot of people really don't understand the issues. We run very by the book paper planes, and so Kristen can attest to this. We've closed our doors for a day or two, not COVID related, 3 teachers have the stomach bug. I can't just cover 3 teachers, but I'm not going to go out of ratio. I'm going to follow the regs. So we have to call parents and say, hey, I can't provide care for the toddler room today because all 3 teachers are out with a stomach bug today, right? But these parents are paying out of pocket. So that creates a whole level of frustration for parents. Totally reasonable that they're feeling that way. And then on our end, we're like, but we have to follow the regulations, right? And we have to provide good care. And also, if we continue to spread this bug around, I don't have teachers in the next room. So it's a real domino effect. And people are very unaware of how the problems are impacting your teachers. Does anybody know what a childcare teacher makes? Yeah, so it's minimum wage. That's the expectation, is minimum wage. And so if I want to pay more than that, which we do, that's coming from the parents, right? So nobody is working for $15 an hour right now. Nobody, unless they are really struggling in life. Let alone the expectations that are in childcare. So then there's the whole level of what are the regulations and people being so unaware of what expectation you're held to by OCFS and regulations. And that's not even about just like best practice. Those are like, these are the rules. This is what's going to keep people safe. But then it's really, is a 1-to-5 ratio good enough in a toddler room? How many of you have watched a toddler? How hard is it? All right. It's a really difficult job to be in an infant, toddler, and preschool room. And, UPK is, while amazing for parents who really want to send their child to get them prepared for kindergarten, it's wildly different than a privately run childcare center that's focused on whole child development. It's very different. We focus a lot on social emotional development. We want to prep them on how to be a good friend, how to cooperate with others. It's less about their ABCs. They're going to learn those, but they're learning them through cooperative play and through the support of their teachers, guiding them through each of those domains, right? So cognitive, social emotional, fine motor, gross motor, all those activities have to be developed. And so there's a lot, and then there's that burnout, and so you have turnover, and then parents are frustrated with turnover. Why is my child's teacher changing? And you're like, well, because I can't charge you more.
Just highlight,
yes.
Just because I'm wondering, if we don't have people here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Who are as deep in this as we are. And I'm not sure if people are aware the difference between pre-K childcare and then a private childcare versus a subsidy childcare. And so this is not an easy system to navigate or figure out. And in New York, our state education department is not under the purview of our governor, right? It's under the Board of Regents, which is under the legislature, and pre-K runs through the state ed department. So it's completely separate from the childcare oversight. Hello? Okay. Okay. And so, I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, so pre-K is completely separate. When the state ed department puts out the pre-K to the districts, it's run by each district. We have 70 districts, I think, in Suffolk County alone. Each district gets to decide how they want to run it and if they want to contract with a program like a Paper Planes in order to provide it at a much lower rate, because they can't afford to provide pre-K with their union teacher salaries, so they go to a program with $15 an hour and no benefit salaries. So the pre-K issue is really, really challenging. We love pre-K. We support pre-K. We would like it to be more developmentally appropriate, but it does have a negative impact on the childcare industry. So that's pre-K. And then childcare, it's called the Childcare Assistance Program now. It used to be the subsidy for families who earn now up to 300% of the poverty level. They can get financial assistance through the county. It's from the state, managed by the county. Those providers that accept those subsidies will get the market rates, which I believe is what you have up here. And the market rate is just based on what people charge. It's not based on the actual cost of care. And there's a delay because of the way the system is structured. So there's a lot of financial help out there for families right now, but it's not addressing the supply issue, the workforce issues that you mentioned. So those three prongs really do play into each other. So I just wanted to make sure we were all on a level playing field on that. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I also wanted to, so I wanted to touch on that as far as the eligibility for the help for the parents. It did change, and this is where I'd like Brittany and Charlie to jump in if I've got this right or wrong. So when we did the press conference in December, Long Island gets shortchanged because our cost of living is so high. When you do a statewide threshold, it's never fair to Long Island. It's great for upstate, but it's never fair for Long Island. So my recommendation was you can take either the 300% of the federal poverty level, or we have 10 regional economic districts or regions, Long Island being one of them. What you could do is take the median salary or the median average income in that region, and then we would take 85% of that median income as the threshold. Usually that ends up being higher than the federal poverty level number. For example, for a family of four, if we went 300% of the federal poverty level, it would be the salary is $83,250 to qualify. If you took 85% of the state median income, it goes up to $93,200. So almost about a $10,000 difference, but that could encompass a lot of Long Island parents. But if you were to take the Long Island median income, it would be even higher. So again, more parents would qualify on Long Island. So that's a change I'd like to still, we made the change and it helped, but I think we could do more by doing it regionally, which would help Long Island parents a lot more and be a much more fair approach to that. But my question was, when you get these subsidies, do you get these subsidies? How timely is it?
It's hard.
Okay. Can you tell us about that?
We just started taking subsidy this year in 2023 because it raised, so we had parents that could, take it and utilize it. So we wanted to offer that. The challenge, there's several challenges. One is that, it's delayed. So you get the payment about a month or two after it's due. So if my tuition's due on January 1st, I'm getting that sometime in, actually I just got a check in June, but it was for April. So you're delayed, and then for the care you provided.
Submit your claim until you provide the full month of care.
Right.
And then there's 30 days.
Because it's also not based on enrollment, it's based on hours. So now it's double the work. My admin, who have other things to be doing, have to put in for each of these children. It's not just here's my attendance. It's this is the time they arrived. This is the time that they left. Submit it. And then the other issue with it is that the parents are really confused. We keep trying to explain we can't just accept that and then not charge the difference because I'll shut my doors then. So they're confused because they're being told, we cover the cost of your care. No, they don't. They do not cover the cost of the care. They're covering it for the market rate. And even at that, if their hours are off by a little, we're getting a lesser, but my staff is still there. So if a parent decides, I got out of work at 3, I want to pick up my child and spend time with them, we're being impacted by that. Mm-hmm. So, and otherwise, and my staff is like, well, do I just put, they're scheduled for 7:30 to 5:30. Do I just put that? And I'm like, no, I think that's fraud. I don't know. You just put what their attendance was. So it's really challenging. And then on top of it, you get your check. I can't even calculate what the parents owe me in the difference because 2 weeks later, I'm getting the explanation of what that check breaks down to and for whom. And how much did each, so it's just one check, but it doesn't tell me which kid it's for. So it's really challenging, and every child has a different caseworker, and so my admin are having to contact a different person every time, and if they're not in, you're not getting a phone call from somebody else. They're not following up on it. You have to wait for that caseworker. So we've actually talked about not even doing it because not accepting it because it's really, really challenging to get paid less than you should be getting paid.
As a parent, how would that impact you? If it were harder to find something, so the government's saying, we're going to provide you this help, but nobody wants it because it's not really helping the provider as much.
Right.
How would that affect the parent? I mean,
Yeah, I think it would affect the parent greatly because I think that, so like I said, I'm a special educator. I'm a mom. When my daughter was born, she was born prematurely. So she had a lot of, we had a lot of developmental concerns about her. So when I was choosing a childcare center for her, there were so many things that were so important to me. I wanted to make sure she was in a place where there would be people that were qualified to, provide whatever assistance she might need or let me know if she wasn't meeting certain milestones so that I could seek out assistance. And, you don't want costs to be the only thing that drives that decision. But unfortunately, in a lot of cases, that ends up creeping to the top of the list where there are so many other things that you really want to consider before that. So I think that it has a great impact, because you want to make sure that your child is in a place where you feel that they're safe, you feel that all of their needs are being met. And if you are just going based on cost, or if you're just going to, choose a center because they're accepting this funding, but maybe they're not doing the right things otherwise, but that's really your only option, it's very difficult. And on Long Island, you really almost can't survive if you don't have two incomes coming in, right? So my husband and I even had that discussion, so do one of us stay home? And, even my colleagues and my friends who have chosen that route and they've left the workforce to stay at home, their children are now missing out on so many developmental opportunities that they receive in a child care center. As an educator, there are a lot of things I know how to do with my daughter, and I could work on her pencil grasp and I can do those types of things. Not every parent has that knowledge, but there are so many things that even with my educational background, I can't provide to her. I can't provide those social situations and those settings where she's really going to learn that social emotional growth that is required for her to be successful once she gets into kindergarten, right? Like, we're expecting children to come to kindergarten and have those readiness skills. They know how to play. They know how to sit and attend. They have basic self-help skills. And so it's very difficult if you don't have the option to send them to a place where they're going to learn those skills, and then they get to kindergarten and they're falling behind because they don't have, they haven't had those opportunities. So a lot of my friends and colleagues that have chosen to stay home are in a situation where they're even still looking for an opportunity to send their child someplace 1 day, 2 days, 3 days a week to try to get those opportunities. So again, just having that issue of now I'm not working, but I still want my child to have these opportunities, and now I can't afford it.
so can I kind of piggyback, and Alex, maybe you can talk to this. Is there enough communication and back and forth? Like right now, it sounds like it's very difficult just to keep up with the developmental issues and how they're going and communicating that, but is there open dialogue for when the children are going to go to the schools, or the school districts? Are there conversations
Zero.
going back and forth? Could there,
No.
should there be?
Yeah, there's not communication. What happens is the child goes in for their kindergarten screening, and they may ask, were you in a program before? That's all that happens.
Yep.
That's the amount of communication that happens for a child going into kindergarten between us and them, unless they're being sent to a private school, which is rare in this area. And then you'd fill out like a little, informational form from the private school that wants to know, where is this child and am I accepting them, right? But there's not communication because, as Jen spoke to, we're two separate entities. So we're not operated by Department of Education, and they're not operated by OCFS. And so, again, I think we're very much viewed as babysitters, and then there isn't that communication. And listen, there are probably some childcare centers that don't have the educational background, and they, have no choice but to hire a body. We operate very differently than that, and so I find it extremely frustrating because I'm hiring qualified people, and so you just want to be treated as a professional. They want to be treated as a professional, and again, I don't think a lot of people know about development of young children, and so for us, knowing that 75% of the brain is developed by the time that they're 5, we do a lot of the work. 75% is a lot. So there's a lot of work to be done. And so in order to do that properly, we need the supports, we need the funding, and you want staff. I have 2 staff members that are incredible that are looking at being au pairs in Italy and Germany because they can't afford to stay here. They can't. Yeah. And they don't want to teach in a school district because it's not their love. They want to work with kids under age 5.
When you say funding for extra bodies?
No, I think what I mean by funding is, the government is paying for a teacher's salary, right, in the school districts. So we don't have that. So making an hourly rate of minimum wage for the hours that are being worked and the work that's being done, nobody wants to do that. And on top of it, it falls on the parents to pay for that hourly rate. So I think what I'm trying to say at funding is not just like people are excited about the stabilization grants and we're going to be getting, bonuses for the teachers this year. For my center size, it's going to be $3,000. It's not a lot. It's exciting. What's that? It's a one-time payment. And so, again, when you're talking about making $38,000 or less for the work that we're doing and the expectations that are there, it's really hard to find staff. So it's not the staffing crisis for sure post-COVID. People didn't want to go back to work. They got really comfortable. But it's beyond that. It's also, do I want to be doing this job for the rate that I'm being paid?
I think on the funding side too, on the public school.
Yes.
Sorry, on the public school question. The public schools are funded by the government, obviously through our property taxes and such. Childcare, there is a portion of it that is funded through the subsidy system for a small portion of a growing portion of families, but it's not paying it's not paying what it costs to provide the level of care, and that's the big difference. And we always say childcare is a public good, just as public schools are. It is, as Maria said, we're helping those children grow, and we are actually providing a huge economic benefit. And there are multiple reports. We did one with the Long Island Association. It's almost a 2-to-1 return on every dollar that we put into childcare because the parents are working, the teachers are working, and we're putting money in. But the disconnect from the school system and the childcare system is just an ongoing battle that we've tried and made some progress on Long Island. But I would love to hear from the school board members kind of your thoughts on all of this.
You want to go?
So that's the first I've heard of it. I think it's great feedback, and it's something that I'll certainly bring back. We use Scope at Sachem. We've heard great things from the parents that we've had. The only issue that we have is our deadline and maybe the private childcare facilities deadline don't match up, so that we have 150 something people on a waiting list right now to get into our pre-K setting. And if we don't tell them by a certain date, then they miss the facility that they would want to get into if they didn't get into our program. So that's the biggest complaint that we've gotten over the last couple of years. But obviously not speaking, that's a problem. We always strive for, higher levels of communication, and that's certainly something that I'd love. Yeah. Well, but just what they've been doing and what milestones they've been meeting, and we have those internal conversations, from certain grade levels. I know they do it from 5th to 6th when they change buildings,
Absolutely.
from 8th to 9th. I know that those conversations take place, but maybe before they get in completely would be a good time to also have that conversation.
Right.
If I could just add I work in Shoreham. I live in Rocky Point, but I work in Shoreham, and I work at the elementary school. So we're K-1 too.
Yeah.
And when we do our preschool screenings, our school psychologist goes and visits all of the preschools, not only the ones that are part of Shoreham's UPK, but the individual ones that just operate in, especially if they have a child who has shown signs of needing early intervention or needing something else. We get a very detailed report back from our preschools at Shoreham as to, and the providers, the UPK providers, on what skills or what deficiencies the children may have.
I will say I have a lot of kids that go to Shoreham, And I've never had anybody stop by my school, not one
Well,
person.
The schools that are in Shorum's district, like the
Oh,
ones that
okay.
are in district, not the kids who are going
I was
to
gonna
schools
say,
in
'cause
Mount Sinai.
never
No, but
have I
our
had.
psychiatrist or our psychologist, she is out and about at least once a week in
Okay.
the preschools, observing children,
Okay.
seeing where the
For the
defici-
UPK programs that are
For the UPK
funded.
program,
Okay.
yes.
Understood.
That again is that
That's the disconnect.
the disconnect between the childcare system and the UPK system. Two totally different systems. So I think the children who stay in a childcare program are
For pre-K.
connection through 4 years old, right? And the pre-K. So that's wonderful to hear because I don't think all districts, even with pre-K, are doing
Well,
that.
Shoreham is excellent.
Great, yeah.
It's an excellent school district. Like,
So
Yeah.
what would you say, should it be then maybe that we turn to the school districts and say, if you have one, let's make it two, and one of them goes to the private instead of just the UPK? Would that possibly, is it a manpower issue? Is it a?
I think it really also depends on the size of the district. Like Sachem is very large. Shoreham is much smaller. Rocky Point is much smaller. So
Yeah.
our resources might be used differently than in a bigger district. You've got a lot more kids coming in. Like our kindergarten class coming in next year is probably under 175, in Shoreham altogether. It's a small group, and
Yeah.
it's the same, it's a small demographic in Rocky Point also. But something you had mentioned before about parents thinking about staying home. I worked in investment banking before I had kids, and I took myself out of the workforce for 10 years to raise my 4 children, and then found myself as a single mother going, oh no, now I need to go back to work. And in order to go back to work, I had to take a very low-paying job as a teacher aide in Rocky Point. But I had to find childcare then for my little guy. And it was so expensive to go to a private facility that I went to, it's almost like a cottage industry of the local mom
Yeah.
who has raised their own kids and now takes kids in and will bring my child to preschool. So I think there's a whole nother subset out there also. They're not teachers by any means.
Right.
But they are warm and caring people for the most part. At least I was lucky enough to have that.
Yeah.
And they were able to provide a service.
Right.
But it's a whole different
Right.
industry.
right.
And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you are, if somebody turns them in, they will get investigated as illegal childcare. And that is another struggle we're having. And it also exacerbates the disparities of people who can afford, who can't afford, who have access, who
To the
speak the
underserved.
language. But I agree, some of those moms are fantastic and they take terrific care of the children. But unfortunately, and part of what my agency does is we get those calls and we have to go out and they could get cited to shut
Yeah.
down.
I mean, I think it's about looking at the systems that are working. I think even in Florida, they give a voucher to a parent so they can still choose their quality place. We get to stay private and provide the type of care we believe in, right? Play-based, which is research-based, right? People think play and they're like, oh, they're playing. No, it's not just play. It's structured play, it's well thought out, and there's always a goal behind it. And there's a lot of evidence. In fact, if you go on my Facebook page, you can find an NPR report on it. And there's a lot of studies about the type of education that children need even through, elementary school. They need to be playing more. And so parents not getting to choose the one that they want unless they have the funds to do so. And then also on our end, like I've spoken to being very nervous about when I say funding. Believe me, I'm nervous because what does that mean? Am I going to lose the freedom to do the curriculum I want to do? Are my teachers going to be able to spend the money on their education if you're required? Like there's a lot of fear.
I want to go back to
behind
the
it.
other word you used, voucher.
Yeah.
What would be the difference? Because I've thought of this too. I think that is a good idea. But what is the difference between the voucher and the subsidy?
That it doesn't matter what your income is. If you have a child under a certain age and you live in that area, you're getting a voucher for childcare because it should be something that every child has the opportunity to do, right? So a parent, you prove, here's my, deed, my mortgage, my bills, I live here, I'm getting a voucher, I get to choose the center of my choice, and then it would be up to them to pay the difference. It's the same thing. We don't expect that the government is saying, I'll pay for all of it, it's free. This is the one I'm choosing, I have this much money to go towards it, no matter what income they have.
So there was something, and this is where I'm going to call on Brittany and Charlie to maybe join in and jump in here and help me out. I had a conversation, and Senator Brisport is heading up the Child Care Task Force
Right.
on the Senate level, and we spoke about this. during the budget process, there was a kind of a pilot program that was put in place, a one-third, one-third, one-third. Yep. Meaning one-third from the parents, one-third from the government, one-third from the company, I believe, from the employer. Right. And it was similar to vouchers, but broken into thirds. I had heard, and Brittany, Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, in talking to Senator Brisboard, he said that got pulled out of the budget and is not going to happen. Is it or is it not in there? Is it still a pilot program?
Senator, I thought it was part of the budget, but it was only going to be in certain regions of the state, and I haven't seen anything from OCFS yet.
So
I think it was going to be overseen by OCFS.
Right,
I have
OCFS.
to double check on that.
OCFS said that they were going to decide that there's 3 regions. They're going to pick a suburban, an urban, and a rural. I have pushed and screamed and made them know that Long Island wants this as the suburban model. I've been trying to get some businesses to say, yes, we'll do this. But OCFS keeps saying, oh, in the fall, maybe in the fall, we'll know. But I think it's an opportunity, definitely. It's a very small amount of money, but great opportunity.
Yeah, and that brings me to a point of coming up with ideas or solutions. I kind of toss this around. This is where the business community and the business groups can help me and see if I'm on target here. Similar to the one-third, one-third, one-third. And I'll take the HIA, for example. So the Hauppauge Industrial Association is a business group with the unique industrial park, which is huge. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we were able to, through the business group, the HIA, and even the Chambers of Commerce could maybe use this as a model, where the business group says, listen, if you're a member of our group, first off, we're going to try to urge or get some childcare facilities to locate within our industrial park. We will offer you incentives, and that's where the government can come in, whether it's tax breaks, whether it's some sort of incentives for them to locate there. The business group says, we're going to offer incentives by saying any member of our business group who uses this child care facility, especially if you work in the industrial park, you will get a discount. The discount will be made up for by the government, so we'll make you whole. But the parents get the discount. This could benefit everyone in the fact that something like a business group that large is almost going to guarantee you're going to be full. So you'll be, and the parents will get a discount. The government makes up for it. The membership, that's a great perk to become an HIA member. And anyone working in that industrial park at lunchtime can go see their kids. They're right there. They bring them to work as they're going to work, bring them to the daycare as they're going to work. Would something like that, and again, it was kind of preliminary, but is something like that feasible? Anybody?
I would say if she's saying that the paperwork is very difficult, can you imagine for a chamber? Would we want to do that?
Well, it would be outside of this. It sounds like you're creating something outside of the existing bureaucratic subsidy system. It would be something the chamber or the HIA itself would run, which they could make much easier, ideally. I love these ideas personally because it takes some of that red tape out of it, and, and it opens it up, and it actually would support the providers at a rate that they could truly pay their staff appropriately.
Right.
But to your point, yes, it would have to be a much more streamlined.
Yeah, I think the government agency issues, right, come into play as there's a lot of regulations. And that's always challenging. Obviously, for good reason, for a lot of it, safety and well-being, but there's parts of it that make it a lot more challenging.
Yeah, I would say that.
Okay, so with my past involvement with the chambers, most of us on the chamber boards, including presidents, treasurers, most of us are volunteers, actually. And this would be a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of paperwork, most likely, dealing with the state. And think of the commitment and the amount of time and paperwork would be involved with this. I don't know if it's practical for each chamber to undertake this on their own.
I would think about, because this is something I looked into in my previous job. We wanted to just rent a space out to someone to have childcare come in, right? We didn't want to be a part of our business, but we wanted it present for the employees because that's a great thing for them. But it was a huge liability, you know? And I think that what you're saying is great, and I could see people, I know businesses would want to do it, but I think there's that liability issue that puts them right in line of fire that they wouldn't want to get into.
And that's where I think, and why I wanted to do this, and I want to share this with the governor and share this with my colleagues, because I think that maybe this is where OCFS could come in. And again, I understand it's red tape and it's government agency and all this, but it's also kind of what they do. But maybe if we streamlined that, because I've also heard, you know, one of the reasons we saw a decrease of 3,000 in addition to COVID was all the red tape to open up, the liability to open up a facility. If we could streamline that process, maybe get rid of the duplicate, triplicate kind of things and focus without eliminating anything regarding health and safety. Obviously, that needs to be met. But there are so many other hoops that we can streamline and get rid of. If we could do that in a way where it wouldn't all fall on the chamber, but the chamber could be the one basically providing the customers, if you will, by saying, you know, for the companies and saying, look, we'll offer this to your employees. As long as you're a chamber member, you get this discount. As long as you're a member of our group. And that's basically the extent of you, is making sure that you say that they're still in good standing and they qualify. But then it still would go through maybe an OCFS or some other agency that oversees it, with the understanding that we're streamlining it. And then also maybe tackling the liability issue. And I don't know how, but
I can say, even because my organization has the word childcare in it and we don't provide childcare, we're currently struggling to find a new liability provider. I mean, it's really bad. I also, and I met with many companies who come in and they're all excited they're going to build a child care center. And I tell them, I don't think you're going to want to do this. But we have child care centers right down the road, or we keep talking about centers. I want to bring up the home-based providers, because that is actually where most of the babies end up going, because it's so expensive to provide babies and infants and toddlers in the centers. So home-based programs are licensed and regulated by the state. There's family child care, which is up to 6 kids, and group family, which is up to 16, and you have to have staff. There are ways for programs, for employers to maybe partner with a program that's close by and say, we're going to pay for these 3 spots that you're going to keep open for our employees, or this, 10 spots. I think there's a lot of creative ways that would keep the employer out of the regulatory liability mess, but would help the program by having a steady stream of income and help the families. Just real quick on the streamlining, the governor did put in some streamlining in the eligibility process. A lot of it, unfortunately, is federal, which comes down, and I'm going to say something really unpopular. Every time a child gets hurt, one child in any program, we get a new law named after that child, and it's heartbreaking, don't get me wrong. And then we add 10 more pages to the healthcare plan because a child needs an allergy. So now we have a very important thing in place where every program has access to a generalized EpiPen. The paperwork that goes behind that put the system in a tailspin for 3 months during COVID because we all had to implement this. So I also would like to call on the legislature to really think about what you're adding on and to push the agencies who create the regs after you pass the law to make it as simple as possible, because everything we add on is 10 more pages.
Child care providers
Hand it-
who have input.
Yeah.
Because I think that while it's important to develop a regulation around health and safety, when something happens, they never consider the impact on us. And we opted out of the EpiPen for the first. We're going to start doing it now that they've changed it. But originally, I mean, you're responsible for weighing every child in your program and keeping their weight on file. I have, 96 kids. you have to weigh them and have their weight on file so that you're in, which it's absurd. That's a lot of, for me, the liability, I almost threw up when I heard that. Like, what? Yes.
Just to have, just in case.
But yeah, yes. And so you get 2 different types because of the weight, right?
Even though if you have a child with an allergy, they should be coming with their
They have their own, and there's a lot of paperwork with that as well.
Yeah.
And again, most of violations, if you look at any violation, a lot of things are paperwork related because you are liable and OCFS is liable. And so there's all these regulations around that. So it's really intense. I think that when it comes to regulations, as Jen said, I would love to see some sort of board of actual childcare providers who explain, just to discuss, not to change anything, but to say, okay, here's what might happen in this situation with a childcare center where it could be problematic. And that's a whole nother issue in terms of like the process of violations. Yes.
So you're saying that I don't need that. You're saying that the childcare system in the schools is differently than yours.
There is no childcare center in the schools.
Well, I'm saying, like, okay, what I'm thinking is that regulations seem stiffer. Like, if you're a teacher, seem very
different.
Right. So, well, my oldest son is 42. So,
Yes.
I was working. I was single mom. Like, I can understand that. But what I feel is that, being underserved. Of course, I'm black, but I think that there should be more of you here in all colors, because I think it needs to be said. You said 6 people, 6 kids. You know how many families I know that need service and they don't work? They
Right.
don't work, and they're making $15 an hour.
Right.
I think that it needs to be talked about, that other layer you were talking about, the other layer of parents who are single. Parents that their other counterpart is in prison. We're not being looked after. I see that everyone here is represented well, but underserved is not being talked about. We got to talk about underserved here. Underserved is not being, you just talked about, you just accepted the program, just accepted.
Right.
Just accepted. So you imagine the ones, I know a couple that have, that program, and they have children, but they're struggling. So now I know why they're struggling.
Right.
I heard it from you. But we have to find a way that it works for everybody across the board, not just the ones, and I'm not picking on you, because you give me a lot of knowledge today, but the underserved. I have a chamber in Gordon Heights.
Yeah.
That's Coram, Middle Island, Medford. That's an area that's really struggling. Okay. I see parents with their kids, with their mothers or fathers, or the grandparents, and they're not being served at the school level because they struggle.
Right.
And so now what happens with that?
Yeah.
So there has to be an answer with childcare. There
Right.
really does.
And I think even what you're speaking to, because if you look at the correlation, and Jen, you could probably speak to this, of safety regulation violations in those underserved populations,
Right.
because if you're behind on your payments, if you're 90% subsidy,
Right.
you're behind on all your payments, you're understaffed, you can't pay for your staff.
Exactly.
Your staff quit on you because there's burnout, because they're like, I'm not working another
Right.
12-hour shift.
Right.
And so those programs have the violations that occur in there are safety related, like children being left unsupervised,
Right.
children getting hurt in
Right.
situations. Now, I think there's a whole nother level to talk about.
The unsupervised, unfortunately, has been all through the county.
Right.
Because of the staffing issue.
Right.
And this is, I think, what gets to the crux of it. But I will agree that the underserved communities, we have, I'm going to pick on Brentwood, we have a saturation of childcare in
Yeah.
Brentwood. Still not enough to meet the need, and still not enough to meet the specific language needs
Right.
of the community. But they end up, I'm sorry. sorry. Yeah. They do end up with more citations, and a
Right.
big part of this, and this is another, I'm sorry, I keep looking at you and giving you recommendations, but OCFS and the counties need to have staff who reflect the communities they work in.
There you go.
And I don't know if our regional office on Long Island even has more than one licensor that
That's it.
speaks Spanish. Now, my team, we do family daycare and school-age childcare, and half of my staff speak Spanish because most of the family providers speak Spanish. It's very hard to hire Spanish-speaking staff right now, but I don't know if the state and the county even have the resources
Right.
to. So the backlogs, the not getting calls back, is because we don't have enough staff within the government. And I know nobody wants to hear that. That we all want to shrink government. And I worked for New York City for 10 years, and I could probably give you a lot of places where they could cut, but we don't have enough capacity, and we certainly don't have enough to serve to work in the underserved communities. So they rely on organizations like mine. And I won't even go into my contracts, but thank you for bringing that up. And you are right that there are very different challenges in those communities.
I also want to talk about differences in, you're an individual provider. There are big corporate ones, and I will not use any names today, but I will tell you that there was a corporate childcare provider that was invited today from again, I won't say the area, but you named it already.
Okay.
And they could not attend because we were videotaping. And they said corporate would not allow it because I think they were afraid they might say something that went against policy or mention something that maybe wouldn't look good to them or something. So they didn't want to participate. So we've got to have everyone wanting to find the solutions as well, and maybe not hide behind the corporate veil. So that didn't help things. I am going to also note that the manager I spoke to very much wanted to be here, sincerely, but was not allowed, and that was unfortunate. Yes.
I do a follow-up question, just as something notes, based on your underserved communities, and you said each person with the subsidies has an individual child care caseworker, and that applies even to underserved communities where there's a large population receiving subsidies. Does everyone in that child care center, say you have 15 children receiving subsidies, does each of those 15, or in that situation, is there a caseworker for underserved communities specifically?
I don't actually know how the county determines which worker gets which case. It could just be you're up on the rotation, so you get the next application that comes in. And caseworker, I think, is a very generous term. These are folks just processing the eligibility applications. They're not really supporting the family. That's something that this county contracts with us to try to do to help them find childcare. But I don't know what their caseloads are right now. I do know they are not moving as quickly as anybody would want.
Wouldn't it make more sense to have one
area,
caseworker for your school, to have one
Exactly.
person who was responsible for everyone at Paper Plains, all of your kids, as opposed to your staff dealing with like 5 or 6 different people processing all of that?
It would make it easier for us, for sure, but I don't know. I'm sure it depends on each childcare setting. Probably takes a different amount of subsidies. You know, they probably have to weigh, like for us, we're sort of like, okay, how behind can we be? My accountant has to tell me that answer. How behind can I be on payments without being behind on payments? Right? So I think everybody has to make a different decision on that. So I don't know that they could do that just based on numbers, but it would certainly be helpful. And also, I can't even imagine if I didn't have an admin who spoke Spanish, because a lot of the people who are needing the support are, you know, they don't have any English language skills. And so there's no way, I think childcare centers, like you should be required to have somebody that speaks Spanish, because sometimes people call in. If she's not there, I have to sort of like get through telling them like, we'll call you back. But I mean, they need childcare too, right? And in the childcare industry too, like that first phone call is so important. You're making a connection with somebody that's looking to put their child somewhere. Oh my goodness, that's such a big deal. So
It is.
I don't know. I think there's so many challenges with it in general. And I don't know if that's the case in school districts too. Do they always have somebody who speaks Spanish? I don't know.
Well, like in my school, like we have a teacher, we have a dedicated ENL teacher, but she is shared between two buildings.
Yeah.
So when she's not at my school, then she's at the intermediate school in Shoreham. So if we have a parent who calls with a problem and they only speak Spanish or that's their first language, it's like, okay, is so-and-so also here? Is that aide working today? Because we know that they're kind of fluent in Spanish, and can we get that person away from their kid? It's always a shuffle. It's not right.
Right.
I don't want to jump around too much, but you brought up Senator Bridgeport before, and I think you mentioned the vouchers. There are a few areas, Washington, D.C., I think Virginia. There are a couple of places that are trying out universal childcare, where New Mexico, that is the goal of the task force that the governor is on. Of course, it's within existing resources, so we're still working on what existing resources means. But to get to a universal place where everybody has access, not that everybody gets free, right? Everybody, depending on your income level, would have access and nobody would pay more than a certain amount. And you're investing in the infrastructure and the programs. And I think we've done some work getting more people able to afford it. We don't have the supply for all of these reasons that we're talking about. People don't want to go into this business anymore.
Yeah.
And we have communities that are known as deserts. The East End of Long Island is a complete desert for childcare. There's a very big underground system there. I think having the business community help strategize not just what it would look like, but how we pay for it.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing nobody wants to talk about, right? This isn't free. This isn't cheap. Caring for children costs money. I don't know the per person amount at schools. I'm in Harborfields. I don't know what the per student amount is. It's a lot more than the per child amount for a 2-year-old. And yet that's when the brain growth is happening the most. So I think that's the conversation. It's a very difficult conversation because nobody wants to put more money up. And I know the state's facing deficits, but I don't know.
Well, so I get back to, and you had mentioned the stabilization grants and things like this. These are all one-shots that do cost a lot of money. I mean, that was $500 million for 3 rounds of stabilization grants. What if we were to reinvest that a different way?
COVID money. It was all
Right,
one-time
right,
federal.
right.
It was over $1 billion that
Yeah.
I wish we had done very different things with.
That's the problem. There were too many one-shots and not enough investments in solutions. And so I get back to, as you said, the business community. And Samantha, you had mentioned that, the company was looking into this, but then the problem was liability and other things. I go back to whether it's the voucher or the idea that I was saying about vouchers or the kind of a 3-way split or just trying to think outside of the box. When we had our budget hearings and I brought this issue up, one of the things I kind of, looked in the camera and said, Psst, businesses, if you're listening, if you are looking to get the best and the brightest employees, offer that as a benefit. Offer to pitch in and pay for, if not all part of, because that can be an investment in the business community too, that will get a return on that investment. Because if you, listen, when you talk about hiring, and the HR folks here will know, when you talk about hiring, that's an expense. When you talk about training, that's an expense. Retention is a money saver. If you can bring in the best and brightest by offering to pay for part of or all of the childcare and say, we're going to offer this for you, they're going to stay for quite some time.
And they can then afford a babysitter. Not that anybody wants to send somebody else to take care of their sick child. But when I want to be with my kids if they're sick. But I understand that there's so much stress for a parent when they're paying close to $2,000 for childcare, and then their kid gets sick. They're telling their boss,
Right.
I cannot be here because I'm not paying a babysitter.
Right.
So, or even paying a family friend, so it feels, fair. But ultimately, who can afford that when they're spending so much money on childcare?
Right.
So I think, to your point with the businesses, if they're investing in that, they also get more out of their staff because they feel they can give more.
Right. So I'm wondering if maybe rather than, and maybe not rather than, but in addition, maybe the government can make an investment in some sort of, whether it's a tax break or something to the businesses as an incentive. And I'm not saying 100% covering it, because that wouldn't be right either. But give an incentive, and the other incentive is getting the best and the brightest employees and not having to continually replace them and all. So if we can team together in a public-private partnership type plan, maybe that's an approach that can help so that we're not coming up with, money that we don't have right now. So would you want to speak to that, then, Kevin?
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts, just going to throw them out there. So one is I really like the voucher idea, right? And I like the voucher idea because, one, it gives the parent that flexibility to choose what's important to them, right? Absolutely. They're going to pay a little bit more anyway with the other programs, so I'd rather them pay for what they're interested in, what they want to focus on. So I think that is a great, fantastic option, for parents. Another side note, so talk about how businesses can help their employees to facilitate paying for something like this. Just something I want to throw out. So we all know FSA, right? The flexible spending account, right? Gotta tell you, a lot of people don't use it because they use it, lose it, or they use minimal amount of it because they don't want to overspend. So it's always a hard sell to get an employee to do the FSA. It's really hard. And I don't see it as being as much of a benefit as you'd want to be. So I want to throw something out here about an HSA, a health savings plan, which is kind of where a lot of the health cares are going these days when you have a company. So you have an HSA, which is, again, that standard amount you can put into an account, right, to save pre-tax to spend for medical expenses. So it would be, and the nice part about an HSA is that you have an additional monies, if it's in there, you can put it in for investments, so it could be growing for you, right? So you'd be like an HSA where you would only be able to spend the money for child care situations, right? Either based on a federal ID number or something of how you could spend that money. Otherwise, you get your tax, you have to be paid the penalty. And then something like that, you also have the HSAs where employers can put in money for the employee, right? So example, like I know my employer last year put in $2,000 for my medical expense, and that is a tax write-off for them in benefit purposes. So then you have like a two-way street. Then throw this out, right? You have extra money because you don't want to put too much money that you can only spend for healthcare purposes, right? You can put it towards day camps, for summertime camps, and in the long run, put it towards like college, right? We all need to eventually pay for that anyway. And I know there's programs set up for that. So it could be something piggy banked off of like the 529, or maybe even put into HSA where it could be medical or that. I don't know, just a thought. Just want to throw it out there.
I love that. Yeah. I also think you need to increase the amount because the FSA is 5,000.
Right.
The cap. And again, is only helping people who work for companies that offer those.
That's right.
So I think it's still that, to make sure we're not forgetting a huge part of the population, but I love that.
Right. Well, even if you talk about, right, only if your company offers it for the HSA, maybe you make it like again, like I'm just piggybacking the 529 program. If it's something like that, you, the employer, like you think about your Metro tax, right? You have in New York City, you have to have as an employer 20 or more employees. You have to have do the training. Forgetting the word. You know what I'm saying, right? You have to have that program in place. Maybe this is something every company, if you have 10 employees or 20 employees or more, you have to have this program. You don't have to put into it, right? Or, right, you can't force the company to do it, but you can allow it as a benefit for each employee, as a savings account for them. And the thing I like about it is people are always nervous about it, but when you talk about college, people always want to start putting away for college when they have kids, and it's like, if you don't use it for daycare, you don't use it for summer, you use it for, college.
Good one. That's good.
So even if not for college, you have technical school, you have
And
you have different trades for post high school. Not everyone should be college bound. We we need people who do other things too.
Right.
So anyway, we were talking about the voucher. That would be great to do as a pilot study. My daughter and God bless 4 grandchildren live down in Florida, and I believe they do use the voucher system down there. So let's do a pilot study in that for businesses. Let's do a pilot study and issue tax credits for those businesses that are willing to participate, and perhaps still be able to retain their employees that way.
Yeah.
There is, your staff might know this, there is a federal tax credit, and I believe a New York State tax credit for companies that either help pay for childcare or help, I don't know the details of it, and I know it's not well utilized, but I thought they expanded it or something in either the last budget or the year before. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. We could follow up on that.
Do some research into that.
We had the stabilization grants, there was 50 million, that was a capital program, then the child care desert grants, the change in the eligibility.
It wasn't this year.
Was it child care block grant?
No.
Yeah, let's see it.
I can also look into it more and remember what I'm talking about.
Okay, Brittany and Charlie, if we could look into that and maybe we could do a follow-up email to everyone.
Yes. We'll have an answer shortly.
Okay. Jump in if you get it, feel free, feel free. Okay, anybody else? Yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to speak from like the HR perspective a little bit about like why I feel like new parents are leaving the workforce in kind of droves. So right now there's no legislation that requires employers to provide any type of paid parental leave. We do have the 2 state mandated leaves, and that's, disability and paid family leave. Now, paid family leave is, great because both the mother and the father can use it to bond with their child, and, it's a pretty decent percentage of their average weekly wage. But we also have disability where the state maximum is $170 a week. And unless your employer is contributing to that premium extra to enhance it, that's all you get. And I don't know anybody who can live on $170 a week. And now this is, for new mothers, and it's 6 or 8 weeks depending on the method of birth, but a lot of them are just opting out of that completely and skipping straight to PFL, and now you're choosing between time and money, and a lot of new parents are going to look and be like, well, time with my child is priceless. So there's the 6 or 8 weeks of disability that you're completely opting out of, and then there's the 12 weeks of PFL where you could essentially have 18 to 20 weeks.
Are you seeing them not coming back? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah. For me, I could speak as a business owner as well. Like, I knew that when I put my insurance policies in place, I'm going to pay that extra for that max amount to, if something were to happen to me, I'm going to want 5 times my income. But I don't have any employees of my own yet. So when I do have employees, that might not be affordable on my end. Right. So.
Yeah, and I think speaking to that, to the parents taking off, if a mom has to go back to work or a dad has to go back to work and they don't have that time, and an infant is coming in at 3 months old, that is a whole nother ballgame in terms of childcare centers where your ratio is 1 to 4. That child needs 1-to-1, basically, right? They can't just be in a bouncer all day. They need so much love, affection, body warmth. There's so much to that. So I think even when it comes down to how are we investing in childcare, if a mom has to go back to work at 3 months, then we should be able to have that extra manpower to give that baby the care that they need so that your 1 to 4 ratio isn't, again, on a parent's dime.
And is it difficult right now for them to find the infant childcare?
Yeah.
For that reason, because of the ratio, and I would imagine many of the childcare facilities are maxed out as far as the infant
or don't offer it because the ratio, because it's so expensive.
So expensive. And you,
The capacity numbers you read off, and I wish I had brought my local numbers, but the trend has been, our providers have been going up slowly, or our number of slots have been going up slowly, but there's been a huge increase in school-age childcare slots, and a big decrease in the younger children. So the availability, and especially since COVID, for whatever reason, the scopes, the big after-school programs, the YMCAs, they've really added a lot of capacity, while we've lost infant toddler capacity. So if you have young children, it's really difficult. Didn't have the mic, I'm sorry.
Let's kind of make sure we did get that, if you don't mind, and then we'll just to make sure.
Okay.
Like the governor to hear that.
Right. So while the capacity numbers can be deceiving, because if you look at overall, it can look like we're going up. But what we're really going up in, at least here on Long Island, is school-age childcare slots and losing the slots for younger children. And that makes it very difficult for parents of young children to find infant and toddler care. It's very expensive to provide. So if you charge a parent what it really costs, it would be over $20,000 a year. And the ratios, and then finding the staff. So there's a lot of reasons why they're not offering it. But that disparity in how we're growing is we're really growing on the school age side.
I was just going to say in response to what you had said earlier, when I first started looking into childcare for my daughter, and she was already probably about 8 months old at that time because I had her during COVID. And so, there was some months there that, I hadn't returned to work. And some people laughed me off the phone when I called, and they said, well, usually people are putting their names on a waiting list a year in advance, and I was looking for childcare for that coming September. So there were so many places that wouldn't, even have the conversation with me, or I was automatically going on a waiting list. And I'm 5 months pregnant right now, so my child that's not even born is on a waiting list, because I learned from the last time. And I mentioned, I work for the school system, and I get 45 days maternity leave. And that has to come from my sick bank. So those days I already have to have accrued them in order to get paid for them. So, I'm looking at going back to work when my child is barely 3 months old. So, just to your point in terms of, thank goodness, I have you guys. But, that's when you're looking at where am I putting my 3-month-old, what you're worried about is, is somebody going to tend to them the way that I would, are they going to sit there and cry until somebody has a chance to come over to them, and get their needs met and things like that. And so it's, I think back to your point also, why a lot of people then say, well, does it make sense for me to go back to work right now? Is that worth the trade-off? And, a lot of times it's not.
That's kind of a perfect bridge into, I kind of wanted to, because I know we're going to run short in time. I want to bring up one other issue, and it may be kind of a crazy idea because we're talking about the shortage right now of workers, and this might initially exacerbate that, but I'm thinking more long-term how it could help. My thought was this: what kind of degree, what kind of training is necessary? So when we started talking in the beginning, and I said the difference between glorified babysitter or an actual career, would it help to make these like certified positions, something where like the schools, or whether it's schools or community colleges or trade schools, offer this as a course that they have to pass? But can we step it up? I guess my point is, can you step that up? Similar to in healthcare, where you have the difference between an RN and LPN, where you have a difference between a PA and an MA. Those are different. Could we institute that to the point, it might initially hurt a little bit, but could it eventually, I'm thinking of somebody wanting to get into this career, and they take the course at the community college or something and say, I want to make this a career. So then the retention problem, although we still have to address the pay and all this, but the retention problem, their mindset is, this is something I want to do as my career, rather than, let me see what this is like, or let me try it out or something. Could it help?
Can I just, the reality right now is that, so Suffolk Community College, for example, does offer some early childhood courses. One of my staff teaches there. The school will push kids to go into the elementary ed. because you can't earn a living in early childhood. So they've shut down, and now we're making some progress. There are credentialing programs, and there actually are proposals to pay people based on those credentials and all of that. But until we start paying people those levels that make sense, we're not going to get people who really want to go into it. I wouldn't let my kid go into it because I don't want them to have to struggle their entire life.
So that's where something like the stabilization grants, where that could be used temporarily to get that going, to say, okay, you're certified at this level, so we're paying you extra, and set the bar, and then from there, it can hopefully...
We attempted to, right, we asked for $12,500, correct? That's what we shot for per teacher. We wanted each staff member working in childcare to be able to earn $12,500 more a year because they're making 28 to 35, right? So that $3,000 is a lot less than that. That's what we're getting this year for our size center. So it depends on your capacity and all of those things, correct?
And I believe it's the same throughout the state, to your earlier point.
Right.
It's always very frustrating.
Always hard. So to Jen's point, I think, yes, if we could say, yes, if you take this position, you can move out of your mom's house. Most of my staff who aren't married to a spouse who pays a majority of their bills live with a parent. That's the only way that they can afford to be in this field. And it's also why people are leaving this field, because, you know, we can speak about your child's old teacher who was stellar and left because it's not enough money and she can't move out of her parents' house. Yes.
That the number one reason? Is that
Yes. Hands down, they do not make enough money and no benefits. We have no health benefits. If I wasn't married to somebody who had them, I would be struggling. Everybody who works for me is either on a parent because they're under 26, or they're married to, or they don't have. I also have staff who get sick and don't go to a doctor because they don't have health insurance. And we work in childcare.
right.
So we're always sick. So it's a real problem. The lack of investment into the workforce for our level of work is astounding. It feels very unfair.
So again, just going to kind of spitball some things out here. So I work with a bunch of RNs, LPNs, and home health aides. And I don't know if you realize, but this year they did I think it was part of the budget where they did the home health aides, the $18, and then in a year it's $20. So what we did is, sisters are just so awesome, Sisters St. Joseph, but what they did is they automatically just jumped to $20 because to them, it was so important that they felt that that career as a home health aide was so important for people and that it deserved the 20. So they didn't want to do the step system. But again, that was a law that, you know, Congress had to put in place or put in the budget there in order to do that because they felt that was a profession that warranted that. So when I think from the conversation today that I'm hearing that we all feel in this room that the child care warrants that type of an initiative. Yeah. My only problem and a thought is it's hard on the employers to pay that wage, that increase of wage. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that's something that could be looked at as far as incentives and paying back to give that. I'm not really sure.
And I don't know that much about the healthcare, that somehow comes through the Medicaid
Structure as well. I don't know. But when you say it's hard, it would be impossible for programs to stay open to provide even a $3 an hour. So the minimum wage was increased in the budget. That's great. We love minimum wage increases. It's going to put more providers out of business because they have to charge their parents more, and the parents are already paying. I mean, I used to pay $2,500 a month. I put all my student loans into forbearance when my kids were younger because I had two boys, less than 2 years apart. That was, oh God, they're old now, like 10, 11 years ago. So I get what you're saying, and I love that the healthcare workers got it. I love that the human services got a COLA. Childcare is almost always a privately run industry, and that ultimately is what holds us back from being able to get those changes. But first of all, my mom went to St. Joseph's. I love the sisters. And I would love to get them on this to help us figure out how did that happen and who's paying that difference.
So we are, because we're private.
Okay.
We're like a home health aide. We're just, the convent itself is someone's home. So we pay for everything. Unfortunately, that is 100% the hard hit for it, right? And again, maybe the ideas I brought out about like an HSA or even just the the vouchers. Maybe these are all ways to get there. I'm not really sure, because you're right. Most like hospitals and places, it is paid through Medicare, right? But then there's people like us who are home. We still have to do it, and we're not funded through Medicare. So we found a way, and I'm not saying I know it was going to be harder, it's going to put more people out of business by doing something like that. So I don't know if there's some way to come up with an idea or more ways for people to pay for the health care, for that reduction in cost to help, so that you could stay in business and still pay people the right amount.
I think it comes to, again, looking big picture. Getting the private sector involved as far as employers to make that investment. Now, I'm going to say something that might sound crazy at first, but hear me out. You look at these numbers, they are extremely high. The cost of childcare is high. With that said, it is not high because they are making all this extra money. It's high because the cost to provide the care is high. And as you said, if you're going to raise the salaries, that cost for providing care is now going up even more. So that it really, as much as, yes, it's extremely high, it's proportional to how much help are we getting and providing. So if we can, that's where like the subsidies do come into play, and they do help the parents. But is it enough? And that's where I go back to, that's where the employers, I think, really have to buy in more. There has to be more of a public-private partnership, because we have to sell the companies, the employers, on the fact that this will help you in the long run. If you can stabilize your staff so there's not so much turnover, your training costs are down, your hiring costs are down, everything is down, plus you're providing benefits, then you can't get everywhere. This puts you head and shoulders above. So that's an investment in your employees, who are the parents, who are going back. So if you have to raise the rates, even though I know they're high right now, but if we're finding ways to offset it with vouchers or investment programs like that, then maybe that's the direction, because it cannot fall all on the providers to just magically raise the rates or raise the pay.
My question would always come back to like, why should it be different than a school for 5 through 12? That's, for me, I can't get past the fact, and given, again, there's fear behind that statement too, because no, we don't want state ed. We don't want to lose our private, run centers, but making it important to the state to also invest. And like we said, I think, yes, the employers investing in their employees, and that way, I guess the concern is as a business owner too, right? Like I can't invest in their health care. So there's a lot of businesses that aren't going to be able to afford to do that. So what's the solution to that if they're a business that can't afford it?
So maybe this is where we get economic development involved, ESD, Empire State Development, something like this, because again, I'm looking globally almost. Right. We struggle sometimes to get companies to come to New York.
Right.
Okay. So again, if this is something where, as you're saying, the state is recognizing the importance of this, and the state says, we need to help.
Yes.
But how do we pay for it? Mm-hmm. And do we put it all on the backs of the companies? Okay, not all, but do we share this? Could that also be something that now makes New York a little more popular, makes New York a little more appealing? Because again, going back to the case of less turnover means less training, means less costs, and all of this, so you're stabilizing the workforce. should we be investing Empire State Development money? Maybe. Should we turn to that avenue and look at it as an investment in business, in economic development? In that if we are helping companies to succeed, we grow, we have more workers, we have a more vibrant economy. Maybe that's something that draws more companies here. So it is more of a bigger picture kind of thing. So again, the pain is shared a little more, but you can also see the benefit all the way around. And it might help us in attracting companies to come to New York to say, look what we're doing here. We really do care, and it's going to help you. So I don't know. Again, that's another, just trying to toss it around.
I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Jen, but even overhead, I don't know if there's some sort of investment for overhead. I think building costs for childcare because of the square footage needed. So you need, really 50 square foot per child. And that's
has capital funds
Right.
to
Yeah.
help build new programs
Right.
up to 40%, I think, of the costs now. We just met with them.
Is that the $50 million, the child care capital program?
Probably.
Yeah.
Which is great, and hopefully it will help. It's the operational and the overhead that really is where. So I love the idea of bringing in ESD, of these health saving, anything that brings more revenue in. It doesn't have to be government revenue.
Right.
Any revenue into the system, and then we need to manage it appropriately so that it's actually having the intended impact. But maybe that's a conversation with ESD of, not just capital, but overhead.
Oh, yeah, I know.
I'm sorry.
I'm sitting here holding this.
I'm trying to project.
Sorry about that. Hopefully we heard everything. But we have to show where this is an investment, where everything here we're doing is an investment, and show how it benefits those that we're investing for, whether it's companies, whether it's employers, whether it's parents, whether it's the facilities themselves. Nicole, do you have?
Yeah, for HR, the directors, wellness programs. That was like a whole big thing, a couple decades ago. Oh, wellness programs, we have to invest in wellness programs. Do you have data that you could send to us on the cost-benefit savings in corporations that implemented wellness programs? Because that could be comparative to the childcare also, for retention, for staff, performance, that kind of stuff.
I don't have any numbers on that, but I could also try to pull something and try to come up with.
Yeah,
But as
at
far
some
as
point,
just
you could pull, because that could be a good comparative when we're talking about investment for businesses in childcare for their employees and retention and performance. You could compare that to when you're implementing a wellness program, where you're investing in your employees' wellness and you're offering social services.
I think that the number one, talking to a company like CA, like Computer Associates or someone. I have, there's also CompUSA, Zebra Tech, North Shore, Manhasset. They all offer childcare on site.
Not anymore.
Oh, no.
CA, they had an amazing program.
Yeah,
closed.
they did. Oh, really? Sorry.
I know North Shore still does. I'm not sure about the others.
Stony Brook University.
It's not, or maybe do they get a discount?
They have their own child.
They do, but I don't know if you get a discount if you work there. I just don't know.
Are you familiar with the lab?
BNL?
Nope, they had to close theirs.
They did.
But they're looking to it. Like
So I just thought that they would have
Yes.
more direct numbers associated with this that might be more beneficial.
I can look into that as well. There might be some more national, bigger companies that, because CA was really the greatest model and was very sad when they closed.
Did they contracted to a private provider?
Yes,
They
yes.
wasn't them themselves operating the program?
No, it was contracted. It was a Montessori program. It was great.
I worked for them for a couple of years.
That would be wonderful.
Do like a survey where we can generate that data.
Absolutely. Well, any of that data information that you could forward to us to use, that would be awesome.
Well, also if we can get, that actually sure might have that. Also, if we can get the average costs of hiring, average cost of training a new employee. Because again, if you're offering this and it cuts down on the turnover and your retention numbers are higher, you're not spending that money. There's your savings right there for the companies.
Which also cuts down on violations. because the more training that the staff have, the less, they are to have a violation in regards to supervision. And I mean, there's a lot of regs, but you spend a lot of time training them on it. And if they're leaving in 6 months, you're like, oh my gosh, I gotta do this all over again. It's a lot.
Right.
So.
Right. All right, so we have about 15, 20 minutes left. So I'm thinking maybe we can kind of go around the tables and just get your kind of closing thoughts or final thoughts on what we could take from this, what you'd like to see from this, or any thoughts you have to wrap it up. And we will start with you, Sven. Oh, let's see.
It's okay.
That's just easier.
So I'm looking at your 3 original bullet points. So affordability, I think I've kind of stressed that a little bit. Availability, that, I thought your idea of, working with businesses to kind of reduce their liability, but maybe have a one-off, right? I used to work for a PEO, a professional employer organization. If some of you don't know, that is when an HR person is hired to do HR resources for multiple companies. So I worked for about 30 companies as the HR person for them. So the reason why you would have a PEO would be so that person could work on what you're not good at, right? You have a business you're good at, that's what you want to do. You don't want to do human resources. So you hire a secondary source for that. So I think that's something like that, maybe having some kind of a model like that, where you would bring in a consulting firm to come in and do that, work out that partnership to reduce costs for the employees and whatnot. I think that's kind of like a good avenue to kind of think about going down, more than just, oh, this is our company, we're having this childcare, because I think that's more harder for people. When we talk about staffing, the 3rd bullet, I think with staffing is always the hard part. I love the idea, and I've never thought about it, about being more of a profession, and I think that's key. One of the things that I got out of this was like more education, right? Which education is always great in every way you could think of. But maybe, like you said, more certificates to give it to the next level. Maybe there's going to be some kind of a funding program for going back to school to get this degree or to better yourself. You know what I mean? I think that would be great. I think another really good thing to add into that curriculum would be a Spanish course or another language, right? To have more than one language would be a benefit to people. I recently just hired a bilingual cultural trainer because a lot of my employees speak Spanish only or Haitian also. So I hired someone in just to help the English people learn those languages so we can talk to them. And she's also helping the Spanish people learn English so that we can communicate better, and I definitely see positive results. So I think any type of education programs we can bring in place and help people to afford to go to those would be beneficial.
I'd just like to thank Senator Murray for setting this up tonight. I loved listening, and you guys are boots on the ground, right in front of it all day long, and I have some feedback that I'd love to bring back. I'd love to see some type of either tax incentive or tax break. There's always debate about, bringing a company like Amazon in and we give this huge tax break, but where we really need to, if we're going to ask people to get higher certificates or more education, that cost is going to get thrown onto the parent because now the cost for the teachers and the staff is going to go up. So how can we offset some of that? And I don't see any other way other than some type of incentive for those companies to do that. But I enjoyed truly being a part of this, and I just want to thank you for inviting us today.
I, too, want to say thank you. In the perspective of the chamber and just reflection on what you said about, helping the businesses, I see that, because in my community, we have a lot of small businesses. And I think this would help them, a lot. And what you said, you just gave me a total education on everything. I really appreciate this. And I'm going to definitely take this back to our chamber. But just a perspective of just working with the businesses, I feel that that's a good stop. But certifying the people that are working is so important to make them feel more than a babysitter. Really, I like that.
I love the idea of the voucher. I think it's great. I think that in order for that to be successful, I think it needs a rebranding, because voucher it has a connotation of you're getting something for free. So if we can come up with some other way to make it seem that it is something that is beneficial to everyone, it's an incentive, it's not a handout. I think that would go a long way in helping to promote that. And I absolutely agree with the certification. If someone is certified and you have these certified people and they're working for minimum wage, it has to be so demoralizing. They deserve more than that. And if they are more certified, the more certification you get, your salary should be able to go along with that. But then you'd have to, like you said, put it back on the parent, which then would lead to less parents. It's a vicious cycle. I don't know what the answer is, but I loved hearing what everyone else had to share.
Do you want to just, I'll wait till the end. So do you want to then take it down?
Okay. I also want to thank you for bringing this issue up and for bringing different voices to the table, because I do think we in this field sit and talk to ourselves, and there have been some really great ideas brought up that help us think differently about how we can maybe make some changes in the system. I'm taking all of this back. We actually have a task force meeting on Monday in Albany, so I will be sharing, if you don't mind, some of these interesting ideas just to start to get the conversation going about how we can think differently about it, of course, giving complete credit, to this group. But this was really great, and I want to thank you all for helping us think this all through.
I also agree. Thank you, Senator Murray, for putting this together. We have a diverse group of people here, and that's good. We could all put something to the table. What I would like to see is the child care providers be on the same par as the health care providers. Certainly, someone flipping burgers at a fast food restaurant should not be paid more than an essential service that you provide. And you should be on the same par as the healthcare providers. I think New York State increased the base salary up to $1,750 for healthcare, so they're starting to take steps in that direction. Let's do the same for the child care providers. State regulations, we need to streamline those and make all the paperwork easier to process. And incentives to businesses. Let's provide businesses with tax breaks and emphasize the positive aspects of providing and assisting their employees, better retention and savings. So all great ideas that were thrown out today, and thank you.
I just want to say, as a parent, I think it was just an amazing opportunity to really be included in these discussions, because I think, we spoke about how it really does come full circle, how it, affects the workforce and everything is really connected. And, but I think sometimes what can be overlooked is that it's more than just a matter of, I have a child, I need somebody to take care of them today, right? It's where am I putting my child all day, every day, where they're going to grow and, their skills are going to, they're going to foster their skills and they're going to really be successful. And so having that choice to find a place that you feel comfortable and you feel safe and is providing, what your child needs, there's nothing that compares to that. And, especially as a new mom going back to work, leaving your child for the first time, I know that Paper Planes in particular, they invest in an app that gives parents constant communication throughout the day. So I get to see pictures of all the activities that she's doing, the things that she's involved in. And that helps me talk to her then at the end of the day. And I can start to say to her, like, oh, what'd you do today? Did you do this? Did you do that? And helps her language develop and just gives me so much peace of mind at work to be able to look down at my phone and say, okay, she's good, she's happy, she's safe, she's doing things that she loves, and not losing that because of affordability or, and things like that. And just as we've discussed, having the staff that's able to provide what she needs and not having this constant turnover, or having people that are unhappy in their job because they're not making a livable wage and they're constantly looking for another, job that would maybe not fulfill them emotionally as much, but provide what they need to put food on their table. And so, and then you have that constant turnover. So I think just investing in the staff and making sure, that we're keeping that at the forefront of our minds and as we continue to have these conversations. But it was really great to be able to be a part of the conversation.
Thank you guys for listening. I know I spoke a lot and I appreciate you hearing everything I had to say. I've been dying to get this all out for years and nobody's ever listened. So, I really appreciate Jen inviting me to be here. And I guess for me, I want to definitely see the gap between us and UPK, and I want communication there and an understanding of why and how we can invest in our preschool, not just, the children going off to the school districts. And I think just talking about a little bit, something I didn't mention was just the emotional impact on our staff to lose those kids sooner than they're ready. That can make me cry because they invest a lot and then they say goodbye to them before they're ready. And they're young, they're still babies. And some of these kids just got potty trained right before they're ready to go off to this UPK program, and they still need so much support. So as that person on the forefront of that, I just kind of want to speak to that piece of it and want people to understand that we don't want to take our babies away too soon. And I just look forward to more conversations. I hope there's so many more of these. So thank you.
Tough act to follow. So something you said earlier stuck out to me, and that was that, you can't give bonuses and raises to your team. And in the corporate world, if you're unable to do that, you're not going to be able to keep a team. And we like to say that employees are our greatest asset. Well, children are our future employees. Mm-hmm. So we need to make that investment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So I'll close just by, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate everybody taking time out of your day and sharing the different thoughts. And it was exactly what I had hoped for, was getting the different perspectives. And Kristen, something you said that really hit was, we get caught up in the numbers and the costs and this issue and that issue. At the end of the day, we're talking about our children. That emotional bond, the importance of what is happening here, you can't overstate it. It is everything. So when we think about this, I think it's also extremely important when we're coming up with ideas and thoughts and all of this to always remember that, have that as the underlying thought of this is our future. These are our kids. We've got to make sure that it is more. It is better, that we're always getting better and striving. And I think everybody universally here today, I think, is on board with an idea of certifying and having different levels of training and all this. And then it's how do we pay for it? But we came up with some good ideas and things to think about. And my goal now is to share this with my colleagues, also share this with the governor. And the hope is, and with you taking it to the task force, it can't end here. This can't be the end. This has got to be the beginning. This has got to be the start, because there were some really good ideas that I think we can pursue here. And getting ESD involved and looking at it as an investment instead of a cost, I think is extremely important. And there are a lot of avenues we can go down here, but I thank you so much, because you've really given us a lot to think about and some really good ideas, and I appreciate it. And that was the key, was getting all the different perspectives from everyone, because sometimes, you're right, it's an echo chamber. We'll sit there and we'll talk to ourselves and, what about this? But we're not hearing over here, well, what about that? You forgot about this or this you've got to remember. And most important, remembering at the end of the day, it's all about the kids. So again, thank you so much. What I want to do is we'll kind of put together a summary, and then what I'll do is email out to you, and we'll do follow-ups to keep you in the loop of what's happening. And if this can get bigger, maybe we do a bigger more formal hearing, bringing in OCFS and DSS and doing something like this, or just us doing a round two and seeing what progress was made from this and where we go from there. But I'm certainly, this is not the end. When we got together in December, it wasn't just for a press conference. It was, we've got to make some changes. We really do, because whether we're in a crisis yet or not, I don't want it to be a crisis. It needs to be fixed. So thank you all so much for everything. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.